Thanks. He's a handsome devil. He's good looking. Good stock. You come from good stock. All right. Hey, good evening, New Vintage Church. How are you guys doing? You look good. You look amazing. And it's dark out there, so I can't actually see how you look, but you probably look amazing. So that's good news. The jokes are not going really well here tonight, are they? But listen, we're going to have a good time. You know why? Because Jesus is good. And I wanted to start off just sharing something with you that last weekend we had our Inspire conference. How many of you got to be here for part of that? Did anybody in the room get to be here? We had 9 people pray to receive Christ for the first time last weekend. It was amazing. That's awesome. Come on, we can't get tired of cheering for that. That's the best thing ever. And we've already had several people today that we got to pray with. It was just very, very special. So come on, God is doing a great thing for people, and that's what it's all about. And we love just being together. We're going to start a sermon series tonight called This Is Us. And has anybody ever seen a TV show that remotely looks kind of like that logo? Has anybody ever seen a show that looks like that? Come on. Does anybody love this show? I build my calendar around this show a little bit. Like, I love this show. But it's a good show. And I like it because it's about a family. I like family stuff. I like the show because I cry a little bit. Does anybody cry at the show? I cry every time, sometimes twice in one show, and I really enjoy it. And I got so involved, I actually, at one point, thought, man, we need to start praying for this family. And then I'm like, these aren't real people. It's a TV show. So I had to reel it back in a little bit. But anyway, This Is Us. We're going to do a series about the New Vintage family and who we are. And how many of you in here, this is your home church? This is your church. Now, if you're visiting or you go to another church, you're glad you're here. But I want to talk to the people that this is your church, because we want to go after some things as a church family that God's called us to do. There's some great churches in town and all over this area, and they're wonderful, and they all have different unique kind of niches of people they reach and stuff, but there's certain things that God's actually said to Pastor Lisa and myself, and as we prayed with our team, that these are some things for our church to do and to be. And so we got to go after that stuff. Are you with me on that? And culture is what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the things that establish our culture. And that's why I'm calling this series, This Is Us. It's who are we at our core? Not just what do we say, but what do we do? What do you feel when you walk in here? Do you know there's a culture in every single business that you go to? 7-Eleven has a culture. Come on, right? Starbucks has a culture. Other churches have culture. Your family has a culture. Your apartment, your house. But you have a culture, but our church has a culture. It's what you feel, and it's not even what's said. It's a unique thing that each organization has, and those are the things that we would say, hey, we're going to fight for these things. Now, my staff and I get away once a year, and last year we went up, last May, we got up to an off-site retreat kind of thing, and on one of the spots as we're talking through how to make our church, a better place and to grow, I said, guys, if you were to cut Matt and Lisa Molt open and just see what's inside our hearts, this is what would be inside our heart, man. These are the things that I believe. These are the things that are in me. And we listed out 7 things that are like the cultural essences of who we are and what we want our church to be. And so I'm going to share each of those, myself and our team, over the next 7 weeks, share these 7 cultural things. And tonight, the first one is this. We want to be a culture in our church that serves other people and doesn't serve ourselves. Are you with me on this?
Yeah, come on.
Now listen, I don't know why it's so quiet in here, but I'm talking about the culture of our church, right? Like, this is who we are. And so we're going to be a people that loves to serve others more than taking care of ourselves. And that's who we're going to be. All organizations can have a vision. We have a vision statement. We have a mission statement. We have strategy, we have statements of belief, we have core doctrines, all those different things. But I love this. Culture is more powerful than all those things. Peter Drucker, the business leader, he said this statement. He said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Listen, it doesn't matter what you say about the strategy for your life or the strategy you might have for your family, or if you own a business. You can have a strategy all you want. But what happens inside your family, what happens in your life, sets the tone and the culture that everybody's aware of that comes in contact with that. And culture is the most important thing you can develop in your life. So with that, I wanted to jump in. I've got a picture of my kids, and I'll show you here. This is them when they were a little bit younger, Austin and Abby and Nolan there. And this is the thing. One of my early mentors when we were pregnant with Austin, and when I say we, it was mostly Lisa, but when we were pregnant with Austin, I remember my mentor said this to me. He goes, Matt, do you know what the greatest thing is about having kids? And I said, no, what's the greatest thing about having kids? He said, the greatest thing about having kids is that you as the father and your wife as the mother, get the privilege and the responsibility to shape and mold who your kids become and what they turn out to be like. And that was a big pill to swallow. I just went, oh my gosh, that's so big, but it's true. And listen, can I just share something with you tonight? Listen, your spiritual life and how your spiritual life is going is your responsibility tonight. And you go, man, I just don't have, God's not doing a lot in my life. That's not God's fault. God's doing a lot of stuff. That might be our fault. Come on, right? The culture, we have the privilege and responsibility to build that. So with all those things, kind of as an introduction thought tonight being laid out, I want to say this. I want us to focus in, and I want us to build the kind of culture that Jesus wants to build at New Vintage Church. So there's a verse in the Bible where a guy named Paul, who wrote a lot of the Bible, he's writing from jail. He's writing to a church that he helps to pastor in a city called Philippi, and he's writing these words, and he's thinking about Jesus, who actually lived on the planet before Paul comes onto the scene historically, and he writes these words about Jesus to this church to remind them about something very similar to this cultural value that we're trying to own. And I want you to see it, and we're going to start and end our talk tonight with this. It says this. He said, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Let's pause right there for a second. How many of you would say in this room, and it might not be everybody, and that's okay, but how many of you would just boldly lift your hand and say, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. That's just who I am in my life. If that's true for you, then the reality is we got to say what Jesus says, do what Jesus did, follow the teaching that he taught. Are you with me? And Paul is saying that right here in verse 5. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. He says, though he was God, he didn't think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges and he took the humble position of a slave. In other words, Jesus comes out of heaven, and in our modern vernacular, we might say it like this. He became the servant of all. He came from a place of privilege, being the deity that created this world and the universe. And he goes, I'm not going to cling to that and hold on to that. I'm going to come down to the planet so I can touch humanity. And he served humanity. And it's an incredible thing. And Paul, as he's writing this from jail, having no privileges, he's saying, you got to remember what Jesus taught us, and you got to have that same attitude that he came to serve, and so we get to serve as well. I want to have a heart to serve. How many of you love a really good meal? Like, I'm not just talking like a big hamburger, but like fancy, good service, like nice lighting, candles. Anybody love that? I love like just a good meal. I want to tell you one of the greatest stories, the greatest customer service I ever had was in a really weird spot. It was in a carpet warehouse. Back when I lived in Portland, Oregon, this was probably 15, 20 years ago, I worked at a store called Macadam. How old? How long ago? Well, you said you mouthed something, so I thought, we're just an interactive church, and so this is good. Babe, you think about it and text me. It's a long time ago, and when I worked at Macadam Carpets, I worked not selling carpet. I was actually a carpet installer for a while. And I did it for about a year and a half and lost money doing it. I'm a horrible carpet installer. And so, but what I did do is I had a really clean truck. And so Macadam Carpets owner saw my truck and goes, I need a guy like you to be my scheduler. And he hired me to work at Macadam Carpets to schedule all the carpet sales that got sold that needed to be installed in homes. I scheduled with about 20 different installation companies. I scheduled all the different homes and laid it out and all that, and it was my job for a while. One of the carpet installers was a man who grew up in the country of Romania, and he had learned English pretty well, had a little bit of an accent still, and he came in about this time of year, and he said, hey, for Thanksgiving time, I would like to come in on a Saturday and just do a really great meal for all of the employees at Macadam Carpets because you guys have given me so much business. And he goes, could I do it here in the warehouse? And I said, yeah, that sounds awesome. So we set it up, and he comes in on that Saturday when we're having this meal, and he starts to lay it out first thing in the morning, and he's bringing out food. His family's bringing out food, and he's setting out tables. He's putting on white tablecloths. He's got these big fancy plates and platters that he's bringing food out. There's like china and cloth napkins. He's got like the kind of like wine glasses that are real that you could go, woo, and make the noise like, what isn't plastic like I would buy. Like, it was fancy. And there's all this food, and he goes, yeah, my wife and I and my family, we've been cooking for 3 days, and we have all this food, and it was just so incredible and elaborate, different colors, and all this stuff, and I'm getting hungry watching this. And I remember I asked him a question. I said, man, why are you going over the top like this? This is way more food than for the 8 employees at Macadam Carpets. Like, what is this? Why are you doing this? And he stops and kind of unties his apron, goes, I will tell you why. He begins to share with me. And I really just wanted a simple answer. But you know how some people want to just tell you their life story? Has anybody ever been like, you're probably sitting by somebody like that? This guy goes on to tell me a part of his life story. And he goes, when I grew up, I was not a Christian, but my mom was a Christian in Romania. And it was illegal to be a Christian in Romania at the time. He says, and I wasn't, but the Romanian government was so oppressive with communism that I knew I had to leave, so I fled, and I actually climbed through the mountains, and I was going to go over a mountain ridge and try to go into another country to get to the west. Tells me this long story, and he says, part of the story was when I get into the mountains, he almost died, and he ran out of food, and it was really cold, and he said that he prayed a prayer, and he said, God, if you're there and you exist, I need you to keep me alive, and it was one of those desperation prayers, and he said, Matt, he says, you won't believe it, but miracle after miracle began to happen. And not only did I find food, I got my way out, and I got across the border, and I got into the West. He goes, and I got into America, and I remembered my prayer, and I started to go to church. He said, I gave my life to Jesus Christ. He goes, everything began to change for me. God gave me a blessed family and everything. And then he leans in, and he says, and so I do a meal like this and give people more than they expect, because that's how God treated me. And so I want to do that for others, for them to see how good God is. And I went, oh my goodness. And all I could think of was, can I try the rice? Like, that looks amazing, And it's an incredible moment. And I remember that meal will never leave my memory, not because of the flavors and some foods that were familiar and some that weren't, that was just incredible, but because of this guy's experience of serving at such a high level, going way above and beyond. He didn't go to Winco and buy the bucket of chicken. Come on, somebody. He actually made a spread to show how good God was. I want you to capture this tonight. When we serve other people, we display how good Jesus has been to us when we didn't deserve it, and we can share that in serving other people. There's a wonderful story in the Bible about Jesus. I'm going to share 2 Jesus stories and one other Bible story tonight. One of the Jesus stories is about this. There's a mom in the Bible who thought her kids were the bomb. She thought her kids were the best. And I think a lot of moms probably feel that way, that their kids are probably, maybe a little bit better than other children. I don't know. Any moms can confirm or deny this, but, every mother feels like their kids are wonderful. Well, this mom goes to Jesus and asks Jesus, she says, hey, in heaven, can my boys be the ones that get the 2 seats next to you and sit by you in heaven? And Jesus says, lady, you don't have any idea what you're asking, because to be at that high a position, you got to suffer the most. And he begins to gather everybody together. And here's how the story kind of winds up. I'll put it on the screen for you. When the 10 other disciples of the 12, when they heard what James and John had asked through their mom, they were indignant. But Jesus calls them together. Now think about this. Jesus doesn't just discipline these 2 guys because they actually asked for a greater title. He gathers all the disciples because all the disciples probably had thought things like that. All of us in our regular mindset, we kind of want to be recognized. We kind of want to be promoted. We all want a little bit more for ourselves. That's just the way we are. And Jesus goes, we're going to have a discipleship talk, a little family powwow. And he sits them all down, and he says, you know that the rulers in this world lord it over their people, and officials flaunt their authority over those who are underneath them. And I want you to think about your boss, or maybe the real life situation that you live in. When you go to work, there are people that are above you, and maybe you have people below you. But people that are above us in this world, they tend to kind of lord it over us. And that could be in politics, in the police world, it could be in our business world. But there is a feeling sometimes that people that have the power want to kind of show you, hey, I'm in charge, you're not in charge. It's my way, it's not your way. Has anybody ever experienced this in any capacity in your life? And Jesus says that's how it is in this whole world. But among you, it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be the servant. And whoever wants to be first among you must become your slave. For even the Son of Man, and he's referring to himself, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom. In other words, he was saying, I'm going to die in serving. That's how far my serving is going to go. My life is going to get spent on blessing you. And so you want to be number one. You want to sit in a high place. You want a good title. You need to know it's going to cost you a lot. And that's not what it's about. That's how the world operates. We're going to come from a different thought process, and we're going to intentionally serve others and make them better, not make ourselves better. This is how Jesus thought about that whole issue. And listen, I want this to get like a soul tattoo inside of us. That when you go to New Vintage Church, man, those people take good care of you. They sit by you. They'll open the door. They'll give you some free coffee. There's got to be something in the culture that's not just stated, but it's just who we are. We go, we're here to serve you. We're not here for me to sit in my favorite chair, for me to get to sing my favorite song or anything like that. We got to exist as one of our cultural values that people don't see it written anywhere, but it's in the air that we are here to serve people. We got to go from a mindset of this world to a mindset that Jesus has. I wrote it out this way when I was trying to think through my thoughts this weekend about this, and I wrote it this way. We want power for ourselves to preserve our preferences, but Jesus empowers us to serve others for their success. This is why Jesus gives us any kind of power in our life. It's for other people. Here's where I think the number one phrase in America is that has maybe fought against this cultural value, and that is this, the phrase, I deserve. I deserve. Now, I talked about this great meal, but I want to just talk about something just a little more common. And you could be on any kind of diet. Some of you could be on protein shake diets in here. You might be eating kale and quinoa and baby carrots, and maybe you're on the paleo, maybe you're on the Atkins, maybe you're doing high protein, modified protein, specialized, there's all kinds of diets, right? Plant-based only. And I don't care what kind of diet you're on or thinking about starting tomorrow because it's Monday. Can I just ask this question? I want you to be honest. How many of you, just sometimes late at night, you just go, if I could just get some McDonald's right now, I would be happy. Does anybody relate to this? And sometimes if you think about it right now, you can taste the fries. You know what I'm saying? A little bit of salt. And it's not enough salt. And so you go, I just need another one. That one will have more salt. And then the chicken nuggets. Now listen, I know it's junk food, and it's not real chicken. But the chicken nuggets, when you dip those in the sauce, for me it's the buffalo sauce. I don't know what your sauce is. That doesn't matter. We're all human. But I like that the nuggets, they make them just a little bit bigger than the little dipping thing. So you have to chew off the little ridge so that you can dip it all the way to the bottom and kind of stir. And ooh, I lost somebody. We haven't had dinner yet, so I know where we're going. But do you know what I'm saying? There's it just hits you, right? It's evil. They've trapped us. And McDonald's, I think, is responsible for the decline of America because I looked this up. In 1971 is when they started their evil plot. And their advertising scheme was this: you deserve a break today. Has anybody heard that? You deserve a break today. A lot of young people in here. Anybody heard that phrase? Okay, all right. So this was their advertising scheme. This thing rode the airwaves. It was in newspapers and everything in the 1970s, 1980s. It morphed a little bit into the 1990s. But I want you to hear what they were saying. They were saying, hey, you worked really hard this week. You deserve to put your feet up and have some French fries. Oh, people treated you bad? You having a little bit of an emotional downturn? You deserve a break today. You need to dip some nuggets with fake chicken in the sauce. Come on, somebody. And this whole idea that because life is hard, you deserve a break today. And this was actually in 1999, Adweek magazine, which is like the king of all advertising materials. They said that this advertising campaign was the number one advertising campaign in the last 100 years. You deserve a break today. And I think that we've got to make sure that we don't live our lives thinking that we're so busy and we're so important that other people should serve us and we deserve a break, that we lose the mindset that Christ is trying to put in us, that we don't exist for ourselves, we exist to serve other people. So here, like this, we want to go from an I deserve mindset to an I serve mindset. That's got to be the thing that resonates in the follower of Jesus. Man, I was watching that show called Biggest Loser when it was on TV, and I loved that show. Come on, Monday nights with people that were bigger than me, working out, and I'd sit there with my ice cream and a bag of popcorn and be like, come on, lady, get it up to 10. You can run harder. I loved that show. Past the Oreos. Come on, y'all know. And so watching that show, and I remember that one of the trainers, grabs one of the contestants and is having that off-site talk with them, and the cameras are really close, and they're crying, talking about their childhood and all that. And she says, your problem is that you don't focus enough on yourself, and you need to give more attention to yourself and take care of yourself first. Your whole life is about everybody else. You need to take care of you. And I remember as a Christian watching this show with my ice cream going, I don't know if that's right or not. And I remember trying to evaluate that. And I want you to know that I think there's some part of that is true, some part of that that's not true. And let me kind of try to explain that. How many of you ever been on an airplane? Anybody been on an airplane? I remember when I was like in 4th or 5th grade, I think, I went on my first airplane trip. And when the lady comes on and she starts talking about the way you got to handle safety when you're about to crash into a mountain or the ocean, and the instructions about the thing, I memorized that. I was scared to death. The lights go here. I rip my seat off. There's going to be an airbag, and I take my vomit bag. I'm going to blow it up, tie it off, and float through the ocean. Like, you're trying to, where's the exit doors? And yes, I'm willing to be sitting by an exit door. But now when I get on the airplane, I put my headphones on. I don't turn my phone off. And come on, I'm just like not listening to the instructions. Does anybody else do that? You're zoned out. There's an important piece of information that's in there, and if you read it, it doesn't make sense, but when you're on the airplane, they still go through it, and here's some of the text of what they say. They say, in the event of decompression, catastrophe, you're going to die, okay? In the event of this, an oxygen mask will automatically appear in front of you, and that's kind of comforting, that just automatically. So if you ever see an oxygen mask, you're about to die, okay? To start the flow of oxygen, pull the mask towards you, place it firmly over your nose and mouth, and secure the elastic band behind your head. And this is where the ladies go like this, and they're trying to show you this. And breathe normally. Now, let me just say this. If we're going to die, I am not breathing normally. I am not going to oh, it's okay. A thin airbag with an orange plastic nozzle is automatically appearing. Everything's going to be fine. Breathe normally. And then she says, or although the bag does not inflate, which would make me panic even worse, because I would be like, why is it not filling up with oxygen for me? Oxygen is flowing to the mask. And here's the interesting thing. If you are traveling with a child or someone who requires assistance, secure your mask first and then assist the other person. Now, I don't know how many of you are parents in here, but come on. If there's trouble on the plane, my first reaction is this, trying to take care of the babies, right? That's what parents do. But the airplane people, even though it's kind of comical in some ways, the reality is this, that there's, in life and death things, there's a reality that sometimes you got to put your own mask on first, because the airplane people, whoever survived the crashes through history, know this, that if there's a hole in the plane, the air gets ripped out at such a high speed that if you spend your time trying to save your child who cannot help any other adults, you will run out of oxygen and you might not make it. But if you can get your mask on, you will be able to survive and help many other people go and make it through. It's an interesting dynamic. Here's the reality that you've got to think about. in spiritual world, in your life, in your commitment to Jesus Christ, if you're a Jesus Christ follower in your life, you've got to get your mask on first. You've got to take care of you. That's got to get set. You need to get the mask on, so to speak. Because here's what could happen. You could come to a great church like this. You could go, oh, I'm going to help out with the Halloween outreach. I'm going to be on a coffee team. I'm going to go to the Habitat for Humanity build and help out there. And I'm telling you what, if you come in and you start doing good deeds and serving others, but you don't have your own mask on and your relationship with Christ isn't right, you're going to run out of air and you're going to burn out and you're going to go, oh, that whole religion thing doesn't work and everybody wanted to use me. But if you get the mask on, if you get it right, and you get Jesus in your life for real, and you get him in your heart, and you're praying to him, and you're reading the Bible, and it's getting inside you, you're going to have enough oxygen to be able to actually help other people and not burn out. You're going to be able to survive a catastrophe. So there's a reality of what that lady on Biggest Loser was saying that's true, and that is that there's places where you got to put yourself first in that aspect. On the other side of it is this reality that we can make everything in our life and pretend like it's life or death. Oh, that steak was not to my liking. Send it back. And we go, oh, I'm first, and everything's about me. And that person did this, and that person cut me off. And at CBC, where the parking lot spaces are this big, somebody's parked and covered 3 of them, and I need us, and everything can be about me first. And we've got to make sure that we don't live our life on the non-essentials like we do on the essentials. All right, 2 hunters were in the woods, and this is a story my dad told me. It was a true story, and I don't know if I have all the details right, but enough for the story to make sense. They went hunting, and they're up in the woods, and it's a snowy mountain scene, and they were going hunting, and one of the guys falls, and he ends up tripping, and he stabs his leg on a piece of wood that was sticking up that he couldn't see because of the snow. And he started to bleed pretty bad, and it was a bad enough injury that he couldn't walk on his leg, and it was starting to get colder, and the other guy who's okay is kind of panicking, going, I don't know what to do, and he goes, I think we should tie that off. So they took a T-shirt or whatever and kind of tied off to stop the circulation a little bit, and from there he goes, man, my cell phone's not getting any signal. He knew it was probably a 3-mile hike if they could find it in the snow back down to the road, and even then you don't know if you're going to survive, and he didn't know what to do, and what he did is, the guy who was healthy, he said, we're going to die up here if we do nothing. So he picks his friend up, who's lost a lot of blood, and it's freezing cold outside, puts him over his shoulder, and even though it was hard to carry this guy, he begins to carry him down the mountain, makes it 3 miles down, somebody drives by, sees them, gets them to the hospital, and when everybody's kind of getting okay and stabilized, some of the emergency first responders are talking to the guy who's healthy, and they said, how did you survive that? And he goes, well, and he tells them the story, and they said this, man, it's like 6 degrees outside, and with the wind chill factor on the mountain, you guys would have died if you would have stayed there. He said, you picking your friend up and carrying him down the mountain not only saved your friend's life, it saved your life. You wouldn't have survived another couple hours out there. And he goes, the heat that your body had to exert and produce to carry somebody was enough to keep him warm and alive and to keep you warm and alive till you got help. And can I just say that's a really cool picture of what it means to serve other people, is that sometimes you think that you're helping somebody, but maybe God's using a scenario like that to save you when you're serving somebody else. There's something powerful about living a life to serve other people. Man, so I thought about this, and I think that anytime you decide to do something to serve other people, it's an act of faith. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to choose to be nice to people. No, it's an act of faith. And the reason I believe that is because if I'm going to help somebody, it's almost always going to be a case where God's saying, Matt, I want you to help your friend, but I'm going to be like, God, you're asking me to help them in this way, but that's kind of where I need help in my life right now. And so it's like, I need somebody to serve and take care of me, and you're asking me to do a little extra in faith for somebody else. There's a great story in the Bible that covers this. It's in the old part of the Bible called the Old Testament, the book of 1 Kings. And Elijah is God's man, and he's been traveling by foot and he's getting pretty tired. And here's what happens. The Lord says to Elijah, go and live in the village of Zarephath. It's near the city of Sidon. I've instructed a widow, an older lady, that her husband had died, which meant that she was poor in that culture. And she's going to feed you. So he went to Zarephath. He arrives at the gates of the village. He sees a widow gathering sticks, and he asks her, would you please bring me a cup of water? And you got to think about that. If he's been walking a long time, he's probably really, really thirsty. And as she was going to get it, he calls out to her and he says, would you make me a sandwich? Would you bring me some bread? And would you just feed me something? And she gets kind of angry, and she's now not listening from her own place of faith. And she says, I swear by the Lord, your God. And she says that this is my reality. I don't have a single piece of bread in my house, and I only have a handful of flour left in the jar and a little cooking oil at the bottom of the jug. I was just gathering a few sticks to cook this last little cupcake. And then my son and I are going to go die. Now, you got to think about how desperate the times were right there. That literally this lady's a widow. She doesn't have a source of income. If nobody helps her, she doesn't have anything. She's run out of flour, run out of oil. And somehow in the middle of the night, maybe God's Spirit speaks to her and says, I'm sending a man of God, and I want you to feed him. And it takes longer than she expects. And now she's almost out. And the guy shows up and says, would you give me some water? And would you make me a cupcake? And she's like, this is my last meal for my child and myself. And it's out of her spot of need that God asked her to serve somebody else. And here's the incredible thing. Here's how the story winds up. But Elijah said to her, don't be afraid. Go ahead and do just what you've said, but make a little bread for me first. Now, you got to hear me on this for a second. Do this first. When God asks you to do something, he doesn't want you to put him second or last. He wants you to put him first. And there's a biblical principle about first things. Listen, when it comes to giving money, don't put God last on the list. Whatever he's asked you to give that first. Whenever God asks you to serve somebody else, don't go, well, I got to take care of this first, and then I'll do that. No, take care of what God's asked you to do first. It's a good place to say amen, because it's true. And then here's what he says. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. And he begins to prophesy to this lady. He says, the God of Israel says this. There will always be flour and olive oil left in your containers until the time when the Lord sends rain and crops grow again. In other words, there's going to come a future day when natural supply will take care of your needs. But in this time of drought, you as a widow, eating your last meal, God's going to provide supernaturally. If you put God first, the principle is this, that if you step out in faith and you serve other people first, God will take care of the needs that you have in your life. And that's why it's an act of faith to serve other people when you still have needs in your life. And listen, there's nobody perfect on this stage or in the chairs right now that has the right to go, I got it all together, and that's why I'm preaching tonight. Listen, there's needs in my life, but it's out of a sense of God, I'm going to serve first, that God can make up the needs in my life. Man, it's always powerful. So the problem with I deserve comes back to a gift I got in second grade. And I went to this kid's party, and I got a little gift bag, which is a cool new trend because you used to go to parties and give gifts to the person who had a birthday. Now you go to birthday parties because you get a gift bag to come home with. And I think that that's an awesome new trend. But in my gift bag, I got one of these things I want you to see. Has anybody ever had one of these? It's called Chinese handcuffs. Anybody ever had one of those? And as a second grader, I thought it was a kazoo. And so I'm like blowing through it. I'm like, whoo. And my friend who knew that I didn't know what these are tricked me. He was an evil second grader. He says, hey, put your finger in there. So I put my finger in the one end. And so I'm like, woo-hoo-hoo, you know. He goes, no, put your other finger in. He goes, try to get out. And the trick of the Chinese handcuffs is that as you pull, it tightens up and you can't get loose. Has anybody experienced these? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. I started to panic as a second grader, thinking about all the important things I do with my fingers in my life. I'm thinking, I scratch my nose. I pick up my chicken nuggets. Like, how am I going to, like I thought I'm there forever. I was starting to panic. And here's the point. The reason I showed you this is this. When we serve ourselves, when we live with an I deserve kind of attitude, it's like Chinese handcuffs. And we're pulling, and the noose is getting tighter. There's actual freedom in serving and going against your natural instincts. Wow. There's power and freedom in serving other people. And you watch. You live a life with this as part of your culture, in your own life and in our church. God's going to do supernatural supply around here. God's going to take care of your needs. I'm going to take care of you someday because you took care of somebody else because somebody else took care of them. I'm telling you, it's an awesome way to live life. All right, so here's the last Jesus story for tonight. There's this great story where Jesus is actually getting ready to do one of the last things he'll do on the planet. He's gathered his disciples together, and it says this: Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, he had come from God, and that he would return to God. I want you to pause right there with me and think about this for a second. This sentence actually seems like it just doesn't fit, like it's a nice little end cap. Jesus knew who he was. But really, it's really powerful to the story. There's certain things you know about yourself. You might know that God's called you to something. Maybe you're a barista or a teacher or wherever you work or whatever you're doing with your family. Like, you might know some things about your life. God might have started to give you some direction. And can I say that the things that you know can actually help to prepare you for what God's going to ask you to do. And so when it says that Jesus knew these things, it's really a powerful statement because it's not just like, oh, God knew this. Listen, he knew that he was from God. He knew where he was going. He knew that he had all authority. He could call fire down. He could call angels down. Jesus knows that he is God. And here it's in this position that this story happens. He says because he knew all that, he gets up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, pours water into a basin, began to wash his disciples' feet. You need to understand something, that when Jesus did that, he was doing what was the lowest job in any house. It was the servant's job. And when Jesus gets down on his knees, takes off his regular clothes and just, goes, I'm just going to take care of you. He was doing something so significant. He was leading up. He was saying, I know who I am, and I don't need to be treated like God. I know who I am. And I want you, can I just say this? When you know that God's got you and who you are in him, you will have no problem serving anybody, no matter what their attitude to you is. When you know things, it doesn't matter. And there's this great story about Michelle Obama. When they moved into the White House, somebody there did not know who she was. And I don't know how that happened. Maybe they didn't have an internet or whatever. And so somebody that's in the moving team, when they're moving in, says to Michelle Obama, the first lady, hey, could you help me move these boxes? And you know what Michelle Obama says? She says, sure. And she starts helping this lady move, stuff around. And she's just sweating it out and doing that. And finally somebody goes, what are you doing? That's the president's wife. That's the first lady. And what I love about the story is that Michelle Obama didn't have any problem with serving other people and helping people because she knew who she was. Come on, we got to live like that. You're God's son. You're God's daughter. And if you just can go, I know who I am, you won't have a problem serving people who are senators or people who are homeless. You'll just be secure in who you are. The other thing that's beautiful about this story with Jesus with this towel is that he's serving up and he's saying, I'm going to get down below you, but because I know my value, he's imparting value up to the people that he's serving. Can I just say this, that if you ever serve around here at the church, you get on one of our teams, you come to team night, you're imparting value. When you're serving coffee to somebody, you're not serving coffee. Come on, you're serving people, and you're saying, look, I'm taking time out of my time to be here early so you can enjoy a cup of coffee, so that church can be meaningful for you. When the band gets here and they're here all day and we just go, oh, they're good musicians, we start to critique certain little details. It's like, can you understand? These people have been here since 7:30 this morning and doing this, and they didn't come to show off. They came to say, we want you to have an encounter with God, so we're going to sleep less. We're going to serve up because we're secure in who we are, so you can have this incredible experience. When you serve, you are serving upwards, and you're imparting value, divine value, into the people you're serving. So awesome. You know what we need? We need less Christians looking for a title, and we need more Christians looking to have a towel in their life. And we got to be people who go, man, I'm just going to walk around like a waiter with a towel. Can I help you? Can I take care of you? And in the middle of that, I'm telling you, people won't understand, but they'll catch the culture. And they'll go, there's something different at that place. Man, I'm telling you, it was real when we were back in May at that retreat. And we're talking about what's the most important things for New Vintage Church. And I said, listen, it goes beyond statements. These are like values that are the culture of what I want us to be and what's really resonating in my heart. And this one was first on the list. It was to serve other people. It's got to be like a thing that we adopt and make it who we are. I hope you're hearing this tonight, and I hope it's resonating with you. I want to read that opening scripture one more time. Remember, this is a guy named Paul. He's in jail. Jesus has lived on the earth. They crucified him, got raised to life, goes up to heaven, and he's told the disciples, go plant churches, start the work, spread the gospel. And one of the guys who's doing that, because he's doing that, he's in jail. And he writes this. He's not worried about himself. And he says this, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Think of others as better than yourself. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had when he had the towel on. Though he was God, he didn't think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges, and he took the humble position of a slave. Come on, that's a powerful thing. I want to give you some real practical thoughts. We're going to end right here. Y'all with me tonight? You're with me? Can I just say this? If you're a husband in here, can I just challenge you? How many husbands are in here? Yeah. Come on, some newlyweds are really smiling big down here in the front. All right. Listen, as husbands, we've got to have an attitude that says we're going to serve our wives, not try to say I deserve something from our wives. Husbands, say amen right here, because you're going to go home with that lady. Come on. We got to come with an attitude. Can I say this? How many of you have ever been a child of somebody? Was anybody ever a child in here? Okay, most of you. We need to serve our parents and honor our parents, not because of what they did or did not do for us, but like the Romanian guy. Because of how good Jesus has been to us, we can serve our parents regardless of what they did. Come on. And listen, we got to have an attitude in the church that says, man, I'm not just going to attend this church and take from church. I'm going to go and I'm going to be a part and I'm going to contribute. I'm going to be part of the culture that serves here, not just is served here. And I think that thing will change our city. Man, this is us. We're people with a heart to serve others. That's what we want to be. I want to pray with you tonight. And I want it to be a significant prayer. I don't want it to be just like, oh, that's what pastors do. They close. Come on. I want us to pray. I want God to move in our spirits right here and right now. Will you pray with me? Jesus, tonight, I'm so grateful for who you are and that, God, you treated us better than we deserved. And God, I pray you would just do something deep inside our hearts tonight, that we would not come with an attitude of I deserve something, but God, you change us, make us people who serve others. And I pray, God, that would just begin to infuse the culture in this place. And every Sunday, every service, everywhere we go, there would be a sense of the divine presence of God and a supernatural flow from heaven through our lives. And I pray, Jesus, tonight that you would just let New Vintage Church, let us become a little bit more like you tonight in our attitude and in our heart tonight, in our actions and what we do with our time and how we give things away. I pray that you would just do that. Make that us tonight.